I stood frozen outside my dad's office door, my heart pounding so hard, I thought it might burst right through my chest. I'd come to ask if I could borrow the car to drive to the mall with my friends this weekend, but what I heard made me forget all about shopping and movies. Tom, I've made my decision, Dad said, in that serious voice he only used for important business matters. I'm giving you the company when I retire next year. All $15 million of it. My hand flew to my mouth. $15 million? I knew our family business was successful, but I had no idea it was worth that much. Thank you, sir, my brother Tom replied, his voice dripping with that fake respect he only used when he wanted something. I won't let you down. I know you won't, Dad said proudly. You've got the right instincts for business. Not like your sister. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Not like your sister? What was that supposed to mean? Lily is too young and naive to handle this kind of responsibility. Dad continued, and each word felt like a knife stabbing into my chest. She'd just mess it up. She doesn't have what it takes. Hot tears burned behind my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. I was 17, just 2 years younger than Tom. I'd worked summers at the company since I was 14. I'd gotten straight, as in all my business classes, and Dad thought I'd mess it up? You're absolutely right, Dad, Tom said, and I could practically hear the smug smile in his voice. Lily's a good kid, but this is a serious business. It needs a serious leader. A good kid? I was practically an adult, and Tom was acting like I was some clueless child who couldn't be trusted with anything more complicated than a lemonade stand. I took 3 deep breaths, just like Mom had taught me whenever I felt overwhelmed. Then I plastered a smile on my face, knocked on the door, and walked in like I hadn't heard a word. Hi, Dad. Hi, Tom, I said, injecting fake cheerfulness into my voice. Am I interrupting something? Dad shuffled some papers on his desk, looking slightly uncomfortable. No, just finishing up some business talk with your brother. Tom leaned back in his chair, not even trying to hide his smug smile. Dad was just telling me about some exciting changes coming up at Maxwell Industries. Oh, really? I asked, widening my eyes like I was super interested and super clueless at the same time. What kind of changes? Nothing you need to worry about, Dad said, waving his hand dismissively. Just succession planning for the future. My stomach twisted into knots. Nothing I needed to worry about? It was my family's company too, wasn't it? When I take over, Tom announced, stretching his arms behind his head, the first thing I'm going to do is modernize everything. New computers, new branding, new staff if necessary. It's time to drag this company into the 21st century. Dad beamed at him like Tom had just announced he'd cured cancer. That's my boy, always thinking ahead. I bit my tongue so hard, I tasted blood. Tom had worked part-time at the company for exactly 8 months, and suddenly he was an expert on what needed changing. Half the employees there had been with Dad for decades. Sounds exciting, I said, keeping my voice steady. I actually just came to ask if I could borrow the car this weekend. Jennifer and Madison want to go to the mall. Dad nodded absently, already turning back to Tom. Sure. Keys are on the hook. Just be back by 9. Thanks, I said, turning to leave. But before I did, I caught Tom's eye. He winked at me, like we were sharing some private joke. But we weren't. The joke was on me, apparently. Poor little Lily who couldn't be trusted with responsibility. Poor little Lily who would just mess it up. As I closed the door behind me, a plan began forming in my mind. Dad and Tom had seriously underestimated me, and that was their first mistake. I went straight to my room and pulled out my phone, dialing a number I'd saved months ago but never thought I'd actually use. Mr. Jenkins, it's Lily Maxwell, I said when he answered. I need to meet with you. Tomorrow, if possible. Is everything all right, Lily? Mr. Jenkins asked. He'd been our family lawyer for as long as I could remember. No, I replied honestly, but it will be. Can you meet me at Café Bleu on 4th Street? Around 4 o'clock? That's quite far from your home, he said, sounding confused. That's the point, I said. I don't want anyone from my family seeing us together. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I see, Mr. Jenkins finally said. 4 o'clock tomorrow. At Café Bleu. It is. Thank you, I said, feeling my heart race with anticipation. And Mr. Jenkins, please bring the company charter documents. All of them. After hanging up, I lay back on my bed and stared at the ceiling. The words Dad had said about me played on repeat in my head. Too young, too naive, would mess it up, doesn't have what it takes. We'll see about that, I whispered to myself, clenching my fists. We'll just see about that. The next day, I told Mom I was going to study at the library after school. It wasn't a complete lie. I was going to study something, just not my homework. Café Bleu was a tiny coffee shop in a part of town where nobody from my family's social circle would ever go. It had mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, and it smelled like cinnamon and coffee beans. Mr. Jenkins was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a leather briefcase beside him. "Lily," he said, standing to greet me, "I ordered you a hot chocolate. I remember it's your favorite." I smiled gratefully. Mr. Jenkins had always been kind to me, even when I was little, and would draw pictures while Dad talked business with him. "Thank you for coming," I said, sliding into the seat across from him, "and for keeping this between us." Mr. Jenkins nodded, his expression serious. "You sounded urgent on the phone. What's this about?" I took a deep breath. "Dad is giving the company to Tom. All of it. And I want to know if there's anything I can do to stop it." Mr. Jenkins's eyebrows shot up. "I see. And how do you know this?" "I overheard them talking yesterday," I admitted. "Dad thinks I'm too young and naive to run the business, that I'd mess everything up." Mr. Jenkins' face softened. "And what do you think, Lily?" "I think," I said slowly, "that I've been preparing for this my whole life. I've worked every summer at the company since I was 14. I've taken business classes. I've studied the company's history and finances. Just because I don't brag about it like Tom doesn't mean I don't understand how it works." A small smile appeared on Mr. Jenkins' face. "I suspected as much." I blinked in surprise. "You did?" "Lily, who do you think approved your requests for company financial records these past 2 years?" he asked. "Or arranged for those business books to be delivered to your home address?" My mouth fell open. "That was you? I thought it was just the publishing company being efficient." Mr. Jenkins chuckled. "Your grandmother, Elizabeth, your father's mother, asked me to keep an eye on you before she passed away. She said you reminded her of herself at your age. Strong-minded, detail-oriented, but often underestimated." A lump formed in my throat. Grandma Elizabeth had died when I was 12, but I still remembered how she'd sit me on her lap and tell me stories about starting the company with Grandpa in their garage. I hadn't realized she'd seen something special in me. "Did she leave any instructions?" I asked hesitantly. Mr. Jenkins smiled and reached for his briefcase. As a matter of fact, she did more than that. He pulled out a thick folder and placed it on the table. She built in a safeguard. He flipped through the documents until he found what he was looking for, then slid the paper across to me, pointing to a paragraph near the bottom of page 27. "Read this," he said. I squinted at the legal language, reading slowly to make sure I understood every word. "In the event of transfer of ownership, both direct descendants must provide explicit written consent before such transfer is considered valid and legally binding." I read aloud. "Both direct descendants?" I looked up at Mr. Jenkins. That means you and Tom," Mr. Jenkins confirmed. "Your grandmother insisted on this clause when the company was restructured 15 years ago. She wanted to ensure that both her grandchildren had a say in the company's future, regardless of what your father might decide." I stared at the document in disbelief. "So Dad can't give the company to Tom unless I agree to it in writing?" "Precisely," Mr. Jenkins said, looking pleased. "Your signature would be required on any transfer documents." A slow smile spread across my face. "And does Dad know about this clause?" "Mr. Jenkins shook his head. "I don't believe so. Your father has never been one for reading the fine print, I'm afraid. He leaves that to people like me and, apparently, to people like you." I sat back in my chair, the possibilities swirling through my mind. I could block Tom from taking over. I could force Dad to reconsider. I had leverage. But what did I actually want? Did I want to run the company myself? Did I want to share it with Tom? Or did I just want them to acknowledge that I was capable? "Mr. Jenkins," I said slowly. I don't want to destroy my family. I just want to be taken seriously. I understand, he said kindly. And what would taking you seriously look like, Lily? I thought about it for a moment. I want a chance to prove myself. I want them to see what I can do before they decide I'm not good enough. Mr. Jenkins nodded. That seems reasonable. So what's your plan? I took a sip of my hot chocolate, which had cooled to the perfect temperature. First, I need to understand exactly what Tom plans to do with the company. Then, I need to come up with a better plan. And how will you do that? Mr. Jenkins asked. A determined smile crossed my face. By becoming the best employee Maxwell Industries has ever seen, starting tomorrow. For the next 3 weeks, I executed my plan perfectly. Every day after school, I went to the company offices, telling Dad I wanted to learn more about the family business. He was surprised, but pleased, probably thinking I was finally showing some initiative. Little did he know that I was gathering intel on everything Tom was planning, and I didn't like what I was discovering. Tom had started making changes, even though he wasn't officially in charge yet. He fired Mrs. Peterson, who had been Dad's secretary for 20 years, replacing her with a friend of his from college. He ordered expensive new furniture for what would become his executive office. And worst of all, he was ignoring the advice of the veteran employees and making decisions that were already causing problems. He doesn't listen to anyone, Mrs. Collins whispered to me one afternoon as I helped her organize the quarterly sales reports. Mrs. Collins had been the sales director for 15 years. He thinks he knows everything because he took a few business classes in college. What did he do now? I asked, making sure to keep my voice down. He changed our entire pricing structure without consulting anyone, she said, shaking her head. Our long-term clients are furious. 3 of them have already threatened to take their business elsewhere. I made a note of this in the small notebook I carried everywhere now. Has anyone told my dad? Mrs. Collins sighed. Your father trusts Tom's judgment. He thinks Tom's new ideas will modernize the company. I nodded sympathetically, but inside I was fuming. Tom was going to run our family's company into the ground with his arrogance, and Dad was just letting it happen. Every night after dinner, I would lock myself in my room and study. I read business management books. I researched our competitors. I developed ideas for how to improve our operations without alienating our loyal customers. Sometimes I stayed up past midnight, making notes and creating plans. One night, there was a soft knock at my door around 11. Come in, I called, quickly closing the company financial report I'd been reviewing. Mom opened the door, carrying 2 mugs of tea. You're up late again, she said, handing me one of the mugs. Just studying, I replied, trying to sound casual. Mom sat on the edge of my bed, glancing at the stack of business books on my nightstand. That doesn't look like homework to me. I hesitated, not sure how much to reveal. Mom had always stayed out of Dad's business affairs, claiming she preferred to focus on her charity work and social obligations. I'm just trying to learn more about the company, I said carefully. Lily, Mom said, her voice unusually serious. I know what your father is planning to do, and I think it's a mistake. I nearly choked on my tea. You do? Mom nodded, a sad smile on her face. You're much more like your grandmother than your father realizes. Elizabeth was brilliant with numbers and strategy. She could see opportunities that others missed. She reached out and squeezed my hand, just like you can. Did you know Grandma put a clause in the company charter that says both Tom and I have to approve any transfer of ownership? I blurted out before I could stop myself. Mom's eyes widened. That sounds exactly like something Elizabeth would do. She laughed softly. Your grandmother never trusted your father's judgment when it came to these matters. She loved him dearly, but she knew his weaknesses. I bit my lip nervously. Mom, I'm planning something, and it might make Dad and Tom really angry. Good, Mom said, surprising me. Sometimes men need their cages rattled. Her expression grew distant. I wish I'd fought harder for my own career when I was younger. I had dreams too, you know, but I let your father convince me that his work was more important. She refocused on me, her eyes shining, with unshed tears. Don't make the same mistake I did, Lily. Don't let anyone tell you what you can or can't do. I felt tears pricking at my own eyes. I won't, Mom. I promise. She hugged me tightly. Whatever you're planning, I support you. And if you need any inside information, she pulled back with a conspiratorial smile. Your father talks in his sleep. I couldn't help but laugh. Mom, that's sneaky. It's practical, she corrected with a wink. Now get some sleep. You look exhausted. After Mom left, I returned to my work with renewed determination. I wasn't just doing this for myself anymore. I was doing it for Mom, who had given up her dreams. And for Grandma Elizabeth, who had believed in me enough to create an escape hatch I might someday need. Finally, after 3 intensive weeks of research and planning, I was ready. Tom had scheduled an important meeting with our company's biggest clients, and I knew it was the perfect opportunity to make my move. I wore my most professional outfit, that dire navy blue blazer over a white blouse, with matching slacks and low heels. I pulled my hair back into a neat ponytail, and even put on a little makeup to make myself look older. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized the confident young woman staring back at me. Mr. Jenkins had prepared the documents I'd need, highlighting the critical clause in bright yellow so it would be impossible to miss. I tucked them into a sleek leather portfolio Mom had given me that morning with a knowing smile. When I arrived at the office, the receptionist Tom's college buddy tried to stop me. Mr. Maxwell is in an important meeting, he said, barely looking up from his phone. No interruptions. I'm not interrupting, I replied calmly. I'm joining. Before he could protest further, I walked straight past him toward the conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see Tom standing at the head of the table, gesturing dramatically as he spoke to 5 men in expensive suits. Our biggest clients, the ones who had been with us since Grandma and Grandpa started the company. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and opened the door without knocking. Every head turned toward me. Tom's animated expression froze mid-sentence, his smile faltering. Lily, he said, recovering quickly. This is a private meeting. Hello, gentlemen, I said, ignoring Tom completely, and addressing the clients directly. I'm Lily Maxwell. It's wonderful to finally meet you all in person. Mr. Harrington, our oldest client, smiled warmly. Lily, last time I saw you, you were knee-high to a grasshopper. How you've grown. I smiled back. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. My grandmother always spoke highly of you. Elizabeth was a remarkable woman, Mr. Harrington said, nodding respectfully. We still miss her sharp mind around here. Tom cleared his throat loudly. Lily, we're in the middle of something important. Perhaps you could come back later. Actually, I said, walking confidently to the table, what I have to discuss directly impacts the future of Maxwell Industries, which I believe is relevant to this meeting. I pulled out the document from my portfolio and slid it across the polished mahogany table toward Tom. Did you read the fine print, Tom? I asked, keeping my voice pleasant and my smile firmly in place. Tom's face contorted with annoyance as he glanced down at the paper. What is this supposed to be? Page 27, paragraph 4 of the company charter, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The highlighted section is particularly interesting. Tom's eyes darted to where I'd pointed, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion to dawning horror as he read the words. His face turned an alarming shade of red, then drained to paper white. This can't be right, he stammered, looking up at me in disbelief. Mr. Jenkins confirmed its validity yesterday, I said calmly. It's absolutely binding. The clients were exchanging curious glances now. Mr. Harrington leaned forward. Is there a problem, Tom? Tom forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. No problem at all. Just a minor misunderstanding within the family. If you'll excuse us for a moment. It's not a misunderstanding, I interrupted, turning to address the clients directly. My brother has been telling you about his vision for the future of Maxwell Industries. But the truth is, he cannot take control of the company without my written consent. That's what this document confirms. A murmur rippled through the room. Mr. Harrington raised his eyebrows, looking impressed. Young lady, he said, you're full of surprises, just like your grandmother. Tom was frantically scanning the document, flipping it over, as if hoping the words might change if he looked at them from different angles. His hands were shaking. "Lily, we should discuss this privately," he hissed through clenched teeth. I smiled serenely. I think we've had enough privacy in this family. Too many important decisions being made behind closed doors. I turned to leave, but paused at the doorway, unable to resist one final parting shot. I looked back at Tom, who was still clutching the document with white knuckles. "Maybe next time you'll remember I exist," I said quietly, then walked out, leaving a chorus of whispers in my wake. As I made my way through the office, I could feel eyes on me. Word would spread quickly. By tomorrow, everyone would know that little Lily Maxwell had just turned the company's succession plan upside down. I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I felt powerful. I felt seen. More importantly, I felt ready for whatever came next. I knew there would be consequences, but I wasn't prepared for how quickly they came. I had barely made it home and changed into jeans and a t-shirt when I heard the front door slam so hard the pictures rattled on the walls. "Lily!" Dad bellowed from downstairs. "Get down here now!" I took a deep breath, checking my reflection in the mirror one last time. I looked calm on the outside, but inside, my heart was racing, like a scared rabbit's. This was it. The confrontation I'd been preparing for. I walked downstairs slowly, one hand trailing along the banister for support. In the living room, Dad was pacing back and forth, his face crimson with rage. Tom sat on the couch, looking defeated, the document clutched in his hand. Mom stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching the scene with an unreadable expression. "What have you done?" Dad demanded as soon as he saw me. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I kept my voice steady. "I've exercised my right as a co-heir to this company, as Grandma Elizabeth intended." Dad's face grew even redder. "You humiliated your brother in front of our biggest clients. You undermined his authority." "Authority he hasn't earned," I pointed out, "and technically, doesn't have yet." "I was trying to explain how this happened," Tom interjected, looking up from the document with pleading eyes. "If we could just find a way to override this clause." "Override?" Dad roared, turning on Tom now. "This is legally binding. Why didn't you know about this? I told you to review everything. That's business 101. I almost felt sorry for Tom, as Dad's fury redirected toward him. Almost. "You didn't think to check the original charter," Tom stammered. "I assumed you had everything handled." "Never assume," Dad shouted, his disappointment palpable. "This is exactly the kind of oversight that can sink a company. How could you be so careless?" I stood silently in the doorway, watching as their ill-conceived succession plan crumbled before my eyes. I was clutching a thick binder to my chest, the business improvement plans I'd spent weeks developing. Dad suddenly whirled back to face me. "And you? Sneaking around, going behind my back is? This how I raised you to behave?" "No," I said quietly. "You raised me to be invisible, to accept that I wasn't good enough, that I would just mess it up." Dad flinched, as I threw his own words back at him. "That's not," he started, but I cut him off. "I heard you, Dad. 3 weeks ago, outside your office door. I heard everything you said about me to Tom." Mom gasped softly from her corner. Tom had the decency to look ashamed. "You never gave me a chance," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "You decided I wasn't capable without ever seeing what I could do. So yes, I went behind your back. It was the only way you'd ever see me." A heavy silence fell over the room. Dad stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time, his anger giving way to something like shock. "What do you want, Lily?" he finally asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Do you want the company for yourself? Is that it?" I shook my head. "No, I want a fair chance. I want to be judged on my merits, not dismissed because of my age or gender. I want what Tom got, automatically an opportunity to prove myself." I stepped forward and placed my binder on the coffee table. Inside is my vision for Maxwell Industries. New marketing strategies, cost-cutting measures that won't require firing loyal employees. Ways to modernize our operations without alienating our established clients. I looked directly at Dad. I've been studying our company for years. Not because anyone asked me to, but because I care about what Grandma and Grandpa built. Dad stared at the binder, then back at me, his expression unreadable. We're having an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning, he said finally. 8 a.m. sharp. I expect both of you to be there. He pointed at me and Tom. And we'll sort this out once and for all. With that, he stormed out of the room, leaving an uncomfortable silence in his wake. Tom was the first to break it. You've been planning this for weeks, haven't you? He asked, sounding more impressed than angry. I nodded. Ever since I heard what Dad said about me. Tom ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely regretful. Look, Lily, about what I said that day. I was just agreeing with Dad to stay on his good side. I didn't really mean. Save it, I said, holding up a hand to stop him. Your actions spoke louder than your words anyway. The way you've been running things lately? Firing Mrs. Peterson? Alienating our best clients? That told me everything I needed to know about your vision for the company. Tom winced. I thought I was making improvements. You were making changes, I corrected him. Not all changes are improvements. Mom stepped forward then, putting an arm around my shoulders. I'm proud of you, she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. And your grandmother would be too. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt tears well up in my eyes. I'd been so focused on proving myself that I hadn't allowed myself to feel vulnerable. But Mom's words broke something open inside me. Do you think Dad will ever forgive me? I asked quietly, suddenly worried about the bridge I might have burned. Mom squeezed my shoulders reassuringly. Your father doesn't stay angry for long. And once he sees what you've put together. She nodded toward my binder. He'll realize what I've known all along, that you have more of Elizabeth Maxwell in you than anyone else in this family. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what tomorrow would bring. The battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time, I felt like I might actually win. Not just the company, but something far more valuable: respect.